It's the 7th day of November 2013. Thank God for our friends at Comfort Inn and Suites in Plattsburgh for allowing us, well, I speak for myself when I say we're filling this room, but we're back again to do an interview with a dear friend, Carol Hoenig. How are you?
I'm fine. It's always nice.
You've heard of the son of the North Country. This is the daughter of the North Country. Cherubusco's finest.
Oh, my sister's here. She may not agree.
And Connie's over there.
Yeah.
She'll be our permanent peanut gallery today. So any mistakes we make, we expect to hear expletives from the corner.
Right.
Yeah, maybe not.
That's what she's like, my mom.
I was just talking with Debbie at the desk before we came in here, and she's telling me about an interview that I did with her. Now, I don't know if it was when I was on the radio or with Calvin or whatever. Generally I can remember what I had for breakfast on a given day, but beyond that, my memory, the old gray matter is breaking down. But it seems like only last Tuesday that you and I and Calvin sat in the former Borders Books in Plattsburgh.
So sad.
With the sun coming in the window. And the only way I know how long ago that was is when I see the picture that you have posted. When there are some hairs that aren't white on my head, and far more of them than there are now. How are you?
I'm great. That was in 2005.
Come on, 8 years ago?
Yes, and both our parents were still alive at the time. I was telling Connie, now they both have passed, and it just seems insane. But it's I can't believe it's been since 2005. But and I was so blown away by the interview that you did with me. I was just so pleased that you wanted to talk to me again.
Just another old fat guy who loves to make his lips move. It's all Calvin's fault because he and I have been doing this since I left the radio business in 1997.
Yeah, Calvin's amazing. I didn't realize that this is his full-time job. This
is what
awesome.
He does. It's called Hometown Cable.
He doesn't get to sleep, does he?
If you look at the Hometown Cable on the internet, you'll see that it doesn't necessarily have $2 or $3 signs on each end of the title. But he's been working diligently at this since the early 1980s.
That's pretty awesome.
And you never got to meet Bob Venn. The
No.
late Bob Venn did a show with Calvin for years called What's Going On Here? And as we look back on those, some of them are classics. There are one or two. There's one done with, what was his name, Jim Mesick? At a sawmill in the Northern Tier that has become an iconic show because of the language, his manner of speaking, his just one of the old guys with a sawmill.
That's
and
so sweet.
Calvin runs it every Thanksgiving time.
Really?
And so, we love to regurgitate these old programs, and he's done many, many thousands. And
Sure.
Because of nice people like you, the show is popular now on the internet, not just on local cable systems.
Right, it's amazing.
So it's at hometown.cablenetwork.com and plattsburgh.com, and it seems to be working quite well these days. At least it was this morning when I checked out. But we all this time, we've tried to do a show a week, average a show a week.
It's great.
For almost 17 years, since July.
Over 17.
Is it?
16, 16
Yeah,
and a half
yeah.
years, 16
Wow.
years.
But who's counting?
Yeah, it's only a number.
So the first book was Without Grace.
Yes.
And it was very successful, and of course I loved it because you're such a dear friend, and because it was good. But there's been a little water over the dam.
Just a tad.
Since 2005. Connie, I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah.
You and I have stayed in touch.
Yes.
If not daily,
Yeah.
quite often.
Yeah. And that's the wonder of Facebook, for what it's worth. Yeah.
But you decided a long time ago that you were going to not only help yourself with the work you do, but help other
Yes.
aspiring authors and authoresses. And That's got to be a satisfying thing for you, Carol.
It is. It's important to educate them on the whole publishing industry, as you well know, how much of a struggle it is, especially in the digital age.
Landmines.
Yeah.
Everywhere
Yeah.
you step.
Yep, and they're used to reading about J.K. Rowling and people who are successful, and
Yeah.
they immediately think that they're going to.
Notice we drop our own names in the same over the. Oh,
But it's you've got to love it for the art of writing.
and we do.
Absolutely.
Most people who write dream of being successful, and when they read their manuscript to their wives, my wife is my first line editor and proofreader, they're satisfied with that. But some of us get lucky,
Yeah.
and some of us work very hard and never sell more than 15 books or so on. And I mean, our viewers might know how difficult it is to get a book, any work, published these days. And it's even harder now than it was when you and I first met.
Yeah. Yeah. Because everybody is self-publishing that wants to write, and then you're competing with all of that going on as well.
So you work very hard in the industry. There is no more Borders books.
No,
You actually worked for Borders Books on the island
I did, and in Manhattan.
and in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And we've stayed in touch with what you've been doing all these years. So at the end of the day, for you, it's not only satisfying to get another book published, but to have helped people along the way.
Oh, it is, definitely. It's gratifying to, help them even to become better writers, because a lot of times they want to hurry up and publish something that it's not ready to be published. And so you try to encourage them to just let it gestate a little and then bring the best work possible. Because this book actually was my first novel that I wrote before Without Grace.
It's incredible how I don't know if you want to say that the book has evolved.
Yeah, I guess so.
But when you start, most of the things I'm publishing now, I wrote at least 16, 17 years ago, and some of the poetry 40, 50, 60 years ago. And I'm discovering little things in drawers and
That's
old-fashioned computer, discs and so on. But it's time.
Yeah.
And people might say, why would you bother? You're old. Who cares?
No,
We're
no,
going to
no,
be here
no.
forever.
No.
But you know what? It is nice to see something that is a labor of your love
Right.
in print, good, bad, or indifferent. And so tell me, you started this what year?
It was 1990,
Let me hold it up at least to show the cover of it so our viewers can. And you
Awesome.
almost didn't bring a copy of it? Come on.
I thought at the last minute I better grab it. I was driven to write a story about my own personal experience of what I was going through. And when I put my youngest child on the bus for kindergarten, I went into the house and sat down and started to write it. And it was going to be a memoir. But 2 weeks into it, I'm like, no one's going to care what I have to say.
That's a good attitude,
I
Carol.
was just like, no one, and then all of a sudden, this is very strange, and this is, you probably could relate to, a voice said to me, I never meant to hurt anyone. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is Laura Sumner. I knew who she was, so I had to get to know her. So I started writing this as a work of fiction from her point of view.
You know, it's sometimes difficult, even though I've spent my lifetime trying to express myself to people in words and on television and so on. It's sometimes difficult to translate those voices that we have in our heads
Without being called crazy.
without being called crazy, and I've been called a lot of things in my lifetime.
Right.
But it's true. We have muses.
Yes.
We have inspiration, whether they're guardian angels, the Lord above, the Blessed Virgin Mary, whoever is by our side. We do elicit whatever help we can get.
Yeah.
And I find myself, saying, somebody got to give me, I got to write a column for Sunday, and I don't have the first word except
Yes.
Gordy on the
Yes.
top of my page.
I can
And you
relate
know
to that.
what? Ever since I've started to do this, and I'm certainly not in the same echelon as Carol Hoenig,
Please.
but my muses, as I call them, have never failed me.
Yeah.
sometimes I've written things that I had not intended or even wanted to write
Isn't
about.
that the best, though?
And
That's the fun
how
part.
many authors have you seen and read over the years who said, I had no clue until I got the first sentence on paper?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to guys like Stephen King, for example,
Yeah.
who's a hero of mine just because he's so prolific in
Yeah.
what he writes, and he'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
That is not to say that you don't have to do your homework.
Right.
That you haven't spent your entire lifetime, and mine, studying people and life and events.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's important to get it down on paper and to share it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this book can be extremely controversial.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing when you
Right.
write, because then it gains attention. Somebody like 50 Shades, see,
Right.
to read this part. Oh, let me just open the book right here. But that's not, being controversial is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Right.
It's not a question of being right or wrong, because
Mhm.
you're writing about experiences that you had.
Right. Right.
So you started this and then you left it.
Well, and I had, the first draft was written in a month and a half. That was the first draft, and I would not have wanted to show anyone. And I'm so glad that self-publishing back then wasn't really that accessible, because if I would have published it then, it was so not ready, and the work would have not been the best work that it could have been. And so I kept going back to it over the years, and that's when I wrote Without Grace. And then when that one got published, that was all good, that was exciting, that was a lot of fun. And then I wrote The Author's Guide to Planning Book Events, which was sort of, whatever.
That was, but that was so much fun. You and I shared ideas
Yeah,
during that
that's
whole
true.
experience. And,
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, there are so many how-to books
Right, right, yeah.
in the world, and
And that
somebody
one
needed
seems
a good
dated
one.
now, because I don't have a whole lot about digital, the digital world in it.
This kind of thing gets dated day after day after day.
Yeah.
The world of publishing
Yeah,
on every level has changed.
Sure.
The world of television has changed a lot since Calvin grabbed his first camera in 1983, Cal, and started doing this. He
Right.
had no idea there's that word evolve again, what would
Sure.
happen after all these years.
Mhm.
And people outside of our area had no idea who Calvin Castine or Hometown Cable was until we were
Okay.
discovered on the internet.
sure,
Our programs were aired on local cable systems,
Right.
on public access.
mm-hmm,
And now, some of these shows get, what's the highest? 1,000, 10,000?
25, the
Yeah, we're talking about-
airbase thing there that,
Okay,
last time I looked was 25,000. That was
25,000 hits.
Laurentian.
Laurentian, yeah.
that's awesome.
And there's a story, for those people who are not from this area, that we hope is not finished yet. I mean, we had this idea that this great aerospace firm was going to come in here and fix airplanes and motors and things, and we were all set to open the door for them, and then,
Yeah.
they say there was a hiatus.
Oh,
And sometimes those hiatuses turns into long-term, in the closet. And
Sure.
so we're hoping for the best, but.
yeah, absolutely.
But this goes to show you how, because of this digital age that Carol just mentioned, everything is accessible to everybody.
It's true.
I mean, it's hard for me to keep up, because I can remember when I got my first computer and I said, what do I know now? DOS? What's
Right.
DOS?
No, it's true. Yeah.
And so here we are,
Yeah.
in a different age, and I haven't even graduated to digital readers or anything.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I still
Yeah, I
still
have
took
an
Carol's
iPad.
book and read it cover to cover.
I still read physical books. I have an iPad, but that's only for, going on the internet for Facebook or that kind of thing, to check my email, but I still love the physical book. I have to. And actually, the first draft of Little Faith was written on an electric typewriter.
You're not kidding
I
me.
know.
Oh
It
my
was a lot.
God!
Then I went
There
to a
wasn't
word
even an
processor.
IBM Selectric.
Well, then I went
Remember
to
those?
a word processor, and I had a computer, and I just did not want to teach myself the computer until I had this all down on paper.
That's amazing, because I'm at least 117 years older than you are, and I can.
Wow, you're doing well.
And I can remember typing at the old Moira High School, taking typing from a gal who'd been teaching it since the 1920s. The first thing they did was bring a 16 millimeter projector in the room
Oh, yes.
and show a picture of these ladies typing 148 words per minute. And I said, have you seen these fat fingers lately? If I get 30 words a minute, and now in my old age, of course, every other strike is a typo. But that's how typing
Yeah,
started with
yeah,
me, and
I
I still have a
remember.
couple of those old typewriters that my
We
dad
had
had at
to
home.
learn. Yep, Mrs. Fritz taught
Yeah.
me how to.
But it's so much easier now. And you know what? And you know what? I know you know. There are still very famous authors who write
Yeah.
everything on yellow steno pads by hand
Yep.
with
When
a
I got
pen
to-
and
Yep.
paper.
When
or
I got
just
to
a
meet
pencil.
Kurt Vonnegut, worked
Oh,
for
there's-
them a couple of
We
times.
might as well drop a few good names
Yeah,
here.
I thought, yeah, I'll throw in Kurt Vonnegut. And he told me, he would never touch a computer. He always wrote in longhand. Yeah.
And I talk about that often. Boy, we're going to hit so many topics in the course of the day. I hope Calvin's got a lot of tape over there.
Uh-oh, poor Calvin.
But it's true. I mean, I talk about cursive writing. It's dying.
Yeah,
Cursive writing
Yeah.
in the schools is dying.
it is.
And there are many people who tell you, and they're going back to typewriters in some schools because it
Yes.
helps you get your thoughts together. Because
And
digital is so fast. The
Yeah.
thought is there and gone.
And it also protects you from things you don't want on the internet. But it's funny, I was texting with my daughter yesterday morning before I left, and she responded after. She goes, "You're making me sick with being grammatically correct in your text." Basically, she goes, "I can't text with cutting down the words like you are for you. I have to spell it correctly because I feel like we're going to lose that. We're going to lose how to spell."
You know, the language, we have a beautiful language,
Yeah.
but we've bastardized it so much over the years because of common usage. That's
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
favorite topic of mine, and how bad grammar has become.
Oh.
And I still watch television and listen to the radio and read the papers and see what we were taught would be horrible
Yes.
grammar is now accepted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
how did we get on all those tangents, as my
I don't
wife
know.
calls them, tangents? So this book took how many years total? From the first
Well,
word on paper to...
Then it was published as an ebook. A company approached me and asked if they could publish it as an ebook, and so that happened about a year and a half ago. So it was from 1990 that I kept playing around with it until about a year and a half ago that I actually.
Had you made changes since it was an ebook, or is that... manuscript?
Minor,
Minor?
nothing major. You do see typos. This is a review copy, and I've found some. I was mortified to find.
I do it every day.
Yeah,
I have a
yeah.
column in the paper every 2 weeks, and I open the paper and find mistakes, and I...
Your brain doesn't see it because you're so
No.
familiar with your own work, but fortunately, an editor helped me with those.
So how did you get this publisher?
They read it on the ebook. They
Oh,
saw
see?
the ebook. Yeah, they read
Isn't
it. And
that
she-
amazing?
And I had actually, I was familiar with her because I helped her promote another title from the publisher that I absolutely loved. It was a beautiful book. It was about imagining what if Amelia Earhart had lived. It's called But This Is
Oh,
Different.
now you're killing me,
Yeah.
because she's like an idol of mine
Book. I'll
ever
have to
since
get
she
you
was
that book.
lost, and she was lost
Yeah.
the year of my birth.
Oh,
It was also
really?
the year that the Hindenburg crashed, and now everybody knows how old I am. But there are things that happened in...
Not if you
in
don't
nine-
know math.
There are things that happened in 1937 that still aren't resolved today.
Right.
And what
Right.
happened to Amelia Earhart? How many
Sure.
books have been written? How many
Right.
millions of words have been spoken from people who said, I know what happened to her?
Right, right. Well, she wrote a work of fiction, and I thought it was beautifully written. And so then the publisher read this, and she came to me and she said, she didn't give me an advance, which was okay because I knew she was going to support it and be behind it. And so I said, let's do it.
Well, my first book was published by North Country Books in Utica, New York.
Oh, okay.
We don't have many bona fide publishing houses
Right,
left.
right.
Our
No.
friend Larry Gooley and
Oh,
Jill
Bloated Toe.
have
right.
Bloated Toe
Right.
Enterprises here, and
Right.
they are a bona fide publisher because Larry has written some stunning books. He
Mhm.
was just on the Discovery Channel.
Was he
around
really?
Halloween.
Oh,
And
that's
we're,
awesome.
Calvin and I are both hoping that some of his books get wider spread dissemination via movies and television.
That would be
He's
great.
that good.
Wow,
He's
that's
very
great.
humble about it, but he's that good.
Mhm.
And this book that he wrote about a serial killer, Robert Garrow, back in the
Oh, right.
that happened in the 70s,
Mhm. Wow.
is good enough that he's had feelers from Hollywood, and we're hoping. So who knows what the future might
Who knows?
bring?
Who knows?
Tell me, just to let people who are watching this program, who are aspiring writers, and I guess we all are at one
Right.
time in our lives or another, what the process was from beginning to end once you found the publisher.
Once I found the publisher, communication. She had a distributor. And that was important to me, to have a distributor.
Oh, gosh, yes.
You know what that's all about. Because if you don't have a distributor, it's really hard to get it into the hands of anyone. Now we have the struggle of finding bookstores to even get it distributed to. So when I knew that, she worked on my timeline. She was wonderful. I picked the day of the book launch. I said, it's good to do it in the fall. And I knew that I wanted to have a big book party. And so I had one in Manhattan, I'm having two up here, and then I'm going to be having one on Long Island. And one thing I knew that was important was to try to find someone to sponsor the book events, just because it helps to promote, it helps, and then I wouldn't have to pay for something in doing this. And so I actually went into my local liquor store, not that they know me that well.
Oh, I love it.
And I asked them, is there any wine company, anybody that you know that's trying to get discovered and want more attention? And he pointed to these little bottles, and this was Copa di Vino.
Oh, yes.
And he said, they might be interested. So he gave me their business card. I sent them an email. Turns out that they were on Shark Tank twice. And they turned down Shark Tank's offer. The guy didn't like it. But they were very interested. And I had asked him if he would sponsor my book launch. And when he called me, he goes, I'd love to sponsor your book launches. I'm like, more than one?
Okay.
Yeah.
We might end up in Katyville. No, that's great.
Yeah, so, and that it worked because, it just helped people, if they're not interested in reading, maybe they'll be interested in taking a sip of wine, and that's why they'll come to.
Maybe both at the
Yeah.
same time.
That would be good. You get them drunk enough, maybe they'll buy a book. You did not hear that.
But that's part of the process. The process almost demands that you have a launch somewhere.
Yes.
My launch is off the back porch, right near the river in Morrisonville, because I'm such small potatoes compared to
you are not.
Carol Hoenig. For those who are
Oh.
watching this program, our friend Carol is with us. She's a Cherubusco girl.
Yes.
How can she possibly have turned out this well? Huh? She can milk cows with both hands.
Oh, don't even get her started with that. Don't even get, my sister is here. and she's-
We know,
We have the peanut
guys
gallery.
here, we can hear the snickering in the background. If we can't have fun,
She will tell you that I didn't milk cows. She will tell you that I was up in my room writing, which is true.
really?
Yeah.
Well, did you write things in high school?
Yes.
I mean, outside of writing your book
Yeah.
report on
Oh, yeah.
Silas Marner or
Yeah,
whatever
right.
it was we read in school.
I wrote tons and tons and tons of poetry. Maybe one or two poems were worth reading today. They were pretty bad. But it got me into,
It's part of the process.
it is.
And thanks to people like you and others, and my wonderful, long-suffering wife, although she hates when I say that, she discovers things in what my mother used to call nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
And so a few months ago, she discovered poetry.
Ah,
I only write poetry when I am truly inspired to do so.
Right.
By events, good, bad, or indifferent in my life. And this started when I was a little tiny child. And I do have poems thanks to my own mother who saved everything.
Oh, I
like the
love that.
modern mother on the
right, refrigerator.
on the refrigerator.
Mhm.
And my wife found poetry that I wrote 30, 40, 50 years ago.
That's so,
And it's, retrospect is a good word. And when you look at something and say, what was I thinking? What was I doing? What
Yeah.
could life have been that bad?
Right,
My
right.
God, that's so dark.
yeah, yeah.
But we've all been up the mountains
Sure.
in the hills and dales throughout our
Yeah,
lifetimes.
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, when I used to write a lot, when my sister Connie went away to college, I would send her poems in the mail to her. And I was so excited because she would tell me she'd show her friends and stuff. And even though it was
Good girl.
really bad
What
poetry.
a good sister you are, Connie. That's
Yes.
wonderful.
Even though maybe she was lying, maybe she didn't actually show people, but,
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. So, will you publish poetry sometime?
I've had some in very small publications, some things published, but no, I don't know. I won't say never. Maybe someday down the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Connie's nodding her head.
Oh, I should.
You should. I have friends. This social media today just amaze me every day. On Facebook, on Twitter, on all the other
Yeah, so
s-
much.
accounts. But there are people who can disseminate what they're thinking on a given day.
Mhm.
And this raw script that comes on. And I have a very good friend, Becky Harblin, who lives in West Potsdam. And she paints in watercolors. And she puts pictures of her latest paintings on Facebook. But almost daily she writes a poem on her reflections of
Oh,
looking out the
nice.
back window.
Right.
And a leaf falling is a leaf falling for most people. But before that leaf hits the ground, she's got 23 stanzas on what it's gone through in that transformation.
Oh, I love
so
that. I
this
love
is
that.
a different age.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Do you
definitely.
blog every day too?
I don't blog every day. I blog for the Huffington Post when feel like I have something to say, something important to say.
You always have something to say over coffee or
Something
toast
to
in the
say
morning.
before I get shot. No, no, I because I am so busy with my business, by the end of the day, I'm like, I just don't have the energy. But I do try at least 2-3 times a month.
You and I have had interesting contact over the years because you have such wonderful, novel, interesting ideas. And one of those ideas that you became involved with and you sucked me into it was kids who think outside the box.
Yes.
Tell our viewers what that is.
Okay, Kids Who Think Outside the Box was based on a book by Stephanie Lerner, and she had written that in 2005. And she found out that she was asking a mutual friend of mine if he knew anyone that could help her work on this to move it forward, because she really did, and that was in 2005 that she had it published, and she wanted to have it re-edited, get it out there. And he suggested that she come to me. And she did. And so we worked on that for a while, and right now it's kind of in limbo because she's got some personal issues going on in her life. But we did have a producer that was interested in it in LA, and so they just said, well, you need to get talent for a host. I reached out, I contacted Tony Danza. He said it was a great idea, he loved it, but he wasn't ready to do anything with it yet. So anything...
What an interesting person to contact for
Well, I
kids
knew
who
that...
think outside the box.
You-
Tony Danza has
Well-
been outside the box ever since he was 3 hours old.
Have you ever seen the TV show that he did? That he was
my
a teacher.
God. Yeah, I know that, of
And
course.
that's why I thought he would be
What a
interesting.
Colorful, interesting
Yeah, but he...
personality. Really?
Yeah.
Tell him I said it's okay.
I'll
Yeah,
let him
he'll
know.
say, what?
Yeah.
Goody Little, who's he?
But, things like this take years. It takes time, and so
What's
that's
the concept? Tell people what the concept
Well,
is.
it's about kids who, everybody in the book that was interviewed are adults. And it was Paul McCartney, Spike Lee, and these are people that have grown up that have always thought out of the box. And so Stephanie wanted to know, what were you like as a kid? Like, to get that, to become who you are now. And so we wanted to generate today's kids to let them know that, it's okay that you're thinking different, that you're not following the crowd, that you want to be creative, that you want to be in your room practicing your guitar, that you don't need to be the most popular kid. Just do what you're driven to do, and it's okay. And so that's what we were trying to base the TV show on. And everybody that heard about it just loved it, but to get all the moving parts working together has been a little bit of a trick right now.
Well, it plucked the right string with me.
Yeah.
And I've made several contributions in terms of people I've known,
Right.
including my own story and those of others who the path through life is sometimes straight and narrow, as
Right.
my late mother used to say. But
Yeah.
I was never personally on the straight and narrow.
That's good.
And we are who we are,
Right.
and we're a compendium, if you will, of every rock we've ever stood on, and every brick that constitutes the tower of life. And so, who can say that's bad, good, or indifferent?
Right, right. We wanted to reach out to people who are bullied for being different. There's nothing wrong with being
I've
different.
written about them. I took a young man who lives in the area and brought him to my kitchen. He'd never been interviewed formally before, and I started a recorder and interviewed him for like 3 or 4 hours.
Wow.
And he could not believe that I would write a story, that he was able to express himself, what daily life was like for him in school and church and so on, and publish the story. And yesterday, just by sheer coincidence, I looked at this stack of things I had written for you and looked through them again. There's that word retrospect, and say, yes, these stories deserve to be told. So I'm hopeful
Yeah.
that kids who think outside the box will become special, because, first of all, I've never thought it was fun to stay in the middle of the road.
Right.
I always thought I'd get hit by a car if I stayed in the middle of the road. So walk in the ditch and go through the fields and climb the trees and jump in the pool with your clothes on
Yep.
and see what develops. So
Mm.
so what other things have happened in your life since we talked last that deserve to be mentioned?
Well, my daughter got married.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That was in 2012, April, and I've just been writing.
You stayed in contact with many people in the North Country.
Yes.
You've never forgotten your
No.
friends.
No.
It's too bad when we get too busy to forget to send
Yeah.
a little note. It's so easy on Facebook now.
Oh,
to say-
it makes it
to say
it's
hello.
so much easier, and some names you're like, wait, I should know this person.
Oh, gosh. I have to go back and look at profiles. and say,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
1962, now I know.
Yeah.
It's like when I run into somebody and a woman will say, Gordy, you remember me? I brought you the birthday of my daughter in 1963 on the
Oh,
radio.
wow.
And I have to go back and just shake my head and say, I'm so sorry.
But when you meet so many people, that's...
And you do too.
Well,
And you do too, because you spend a lot of time. You live where on Long Island?
Belmore, Long Island.
Belmore.
Yep. And I'm not far from the city, so it takes about 50 minutes to get into Manhattan from where I live.
So what do you do every day?
Every day, I wake up, I have my coffee. No.
Oh, wow.
No, I have clients. I've been doing a lot of ghostwriting for other authors. Well, not authors, for people who cannot write but they have a story to tell. So I do that. I edit. I don't like the line editing. I find that so boring. It's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
I'd rather do the developmental editing, which means you look at the overall picture and you say where the story's working, what needs work, help, what, all that. To me, I enjoy working with authors, and I do a lot of that. And I do publicity as well for other authors, and I tell them how to promote their books and how to, for instance, so many of my friends are amazed that all the book launches that I have booked, none of them so far are in a bookstore. And I tell them, I said,
It used to be that if you didn't do it in a bookstore, you didn't do it at all.
Right.
Now you can't. Here we are in the North Country, and you can't find a bookstore.
right. Well,
There
I
are so few.
want you to
bona
know, I
fide-
reached out to Gordy when I knew I wanted to come up here, and you're the one who gave me this great suggestion of
Just-
and I took advantage of it, and I'll be at Comfort Inn, and then I'll also be at the Chattagay Town Hall Theater. And my name is on the board.
The marquee.
The marquee, yes.
Here, can you know you're from Cherubusco when you drive through Chattagay and you look at that wonderful old theater, it used to be a theater building, and you see your name. It's not
I'm
in
just-
it's not
yeah.
in lights, although they might have a spotlight on it. I don't know.
Could you get that, Connie? Could you put the lights?
No.
But
But it is wonderful, and it's a kick to drive through.
And what's interesting is that's the building that years ago, before I moved to Long Island, I worked as a secretary that was an annex office for Poissant and Twist
Come
attorneys.
on. Did you really?
I worked as a receptionist secretary, and across the hall was a library, so there weren't many clients coming in, so that library was a lifesaver.
You know, that library is a wonderful place today, and they've invited me to come down there and speak on several occasions. The thing I hate the most is being forced to speak from a podium.
Oh, really?
This is my format.
Oh, okay.
You know, if I have 2 people there or 200, I want to be able to walk among them,
Yeah.
look them in the eye and say, why don't you believe in ghosts?
What, say it?
I can't even see that
I
far,
can't,
Connie. What is it?
What does it say?
Don't forget the cornerstone.
Oh, yes, thank you. See, my sister's good. Cornerstone
Isn't
Bookshop is going to be here selling books as well, and they're going to be carrying my books. So they'll have copies of Without Grace, I
And
found
they're,
out.
they're,
Let's tell
they're
you.
good friends. Thank
Yeah.
God for that place. I mean,
Yeah.
Calvin and I did our first show there, I can't even tell you how many years ago, 15 years maybe,
Probably.
or more.
And he was generous because when I called him, he said, well, we're tight, we don't have a lot of room. I said, but do you do off-sites?
Yeah.
And so they'll be
Oh,
bringing the
isn't that,
books.
isn't that
Yeah.
wonderful? This is one of the few remaining real book stores. If you
Yeah.
are like we are, you go in a bookstore like that and then you go in 3 floors and you just get lost.
Oh, you're
I mean,
lost.
this is nirvana for somebody
Yeah.
who enjoys reading in a book,
Yeah.
in a place like that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I spent my whole childhood, as you might have, in the local libraries. Before the internet was invented, that's where you did things.
Well, when school was in session, but if school wasn't in session, I didn't have access to the library.
Yeah, well,
That's why I started writing.
Is
In
it?
yeah, because I needed to read something. I thought, well, I guess I'm gonna have to write it.
That's not
I'm
vanity. That's some other definition that I'm not
It
sure
was,
of.
it was out of desperation. No, my
Yeah.
mom had the Reader's Digest books on the shelf and the Bible, and
Isn't that interesting?
that's all that we had.
Our lives, even though we do so many diverse things through our lifetimes, there are places where we could find similarity between our childhood
Right.
in different eras. But my mother, there was the Bible, and there was the Reader's Digest.
Isn't that
And as a little kid, I wasn't sure which book should be higher on the stack. Because I lived in Westchester County. This is not my story, it's
No,
Carol.
no,
It's
no,
Carol's.
it's
But the
fascinating.
first words to me were probably written from the Reader's Digest, because my father worked part-time at the Reader's Digest
Oh, my
in Pleasantville.
Wow,
And so he would
Pleasantville,
bring the
wow.
latest copy of the Reader's Digest home, and my mother would read that book to me from cover.
Oh my gosh, the laughter.
So I knew every most unforgettable character since Charlie Chaplin, and I have today collections of Reader's Digest.
You
that date way
still
back.
have the collections?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
If the mice and the silverfish haven't eaten them all. But the Reader's Digest
Yeah.
and the Bible
Yep.
side by
Yep,
side.
that was-
Isn't that interesting? Even in Cherubusco.
And Cherubusco, yes. Yeah.
I was valedictorian of my high school class, which is no big deal because I had 11 people in my
Right.
class. But my gift for being valedictorian, on the stage when you graduate,
Right.
and they said, and because Gordy Little had a 93.8 average, he will receive a 1-year subscription
No.
to Reader's Digest.
No.
And even Calvin bought me a subscription to Reader's Digest for a long, long time. Isn't that interesting?
That's too funny.
So this book
Yes.
of Little Faith is jam-packed with, I call it food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of your religious or spiritual orientation, your thoughts on marriage, on life in general. People read this and will have an opinion.
Sure.
I don't care who they are, what their beliefs are, they will have an opinion. They'll love you, hate you, or be
Right.
completely neutral about that.
Right.
But there's no way you can separate yourself from this book, no matter
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So in retrospect, if I might use that word again,
Right.
what are your feelings about it right now?
Right now, I'm very proud of it. I had a reviewer for the Long Island Woman who sent me an email. She called me brave. She goes, "You're very brave to have written this." And I said, "No, I think I would have been a coward not to have written it. It was something that it was gestating inside me, and I had to get it out. And it wasn't to point fingers at anyone. There's no one particular, as you know, there's no one particular religion that I point out. I give it the church is a very vague name, but a lot of the incidents in the book I witnessed firsthand. A lot of the contradictions, a lot of the judgments, a lot of the, people that that straight and narrow, as you were talking about, just can't even think outside the box. Oh, look how I wrapped that up.
See, she works that in everywhere. Oh, Connie.
The whole book is just sort of, it's to get people talking, to get people thinking, to get people to realize that, just because you've been raised a certain way doesn't mean your neighbor was raised a certain way or has the same belief systems.
What goes on in houses in Brooklyn, in Stuyvesant, and in Port Jefferson and Port Washington,
Right.
and Cherubusco I'd use that word diverse again.
Yes.
Thank goodness we all have the capability of believing different things and espousing certain beliefs and changing our minds over the years.
And I used to think that was bad, to change your mind. I used to think that I was
I hope not. I hope not. Because mine will be different when I leave this room than it was this morning.
I love
So-
that. Well, that's why because I was involved in a fundamental church for a few years, and I was sincere in it. I believed in it, and then as I could see the little threads unraveling, and then the people's lives that were judging other people and putting themselves on a pedestal. It just started to break my heart. And I think I told you the story, but the one thing that was the heartbreaker of all heartbreaks was a 15-year-old boy who was very involved in the church, and because of his parents, and he went to a Christian school, and everything was all about that. And he went home one afternoon, took his father's gun, and shot himself. He killed himself. I to this day, I cannot get over that because this was so involved in the church, and the Bible promises that God will not give you more than you can bear. And this child had more than he could bear. And it to me, that was just, I talked to the minister about it. I said, and he goes, "Oh, well, the parents are going to talk to him when they get to heaven." I said, "I don't care about the parents right now. I care about this young boy who was that desperate." I said that we weren't there for him. So that is one reason why I have to get these words out. I have to, for that young boy that didn't even know me, probably.
So this book is in stores just about everywhere.
Hopefully,
If people are watching this, people watch this in other countries, in other states,
That's awesome.
and other places because of the internet,
Right.
because of HometownCableNetwork.com and Plattsburgh.com. So how do they get a copy of it if they want one?
They would probably get it on either steelcutpress.com.
Oh, we didn't even mention that name.
Yeah, that's the publisher,
SteelCutPress.com.
and Amazon carries it. And hopefully, if they want to go into their bookstore, that would be awesome, because then maybe the bookstore will order more than one copy. But if they're in the area, Cornerstone Bookstore.
Do you work hard to make sure this is in libraries?
That's the next step. I am going to actually be doing, you mentioned Port Washington before?
Yes,
I'm
I
doing
did.
the Port Washington Library January 14th.
Come on.
Yeah.
You know,
How did
where-
you mention that?
Who knows?
Read my mind.
who knows where the
Yeah.
stuff comes from in our
Yeah.
head at any given time, and I just blurt things out, and people don't
That's
expect it to be
hysterical.
any different from me after all of this time. But it's as important, I think, for us as we sit here on Hometown Cable to define the process of publishing as it is to promote this book specifically, although we hope to sell at least 6 or 7 million copies, and then it becomes a movie before we get
That-
too old to turn our television sets on and watch it.
Television, maybe television won't even be in existence, who knows?
You know, but who knows what the future
Right.
might bring with it. But I know you have high hopes,
I do.
and
I
you're
do.
satisfied with the process so far.
So far I am, and you know, it's because I try to make the best of everything, no matter what it is. And that's just my personality. And so, you know,
Me too.
you know, and you just,
Yeah.
you hope for the best, and you hope people will start talking about it and being, and like you said, whether they love it, hate it, if it gets people talking and wanting to buy it, and, you know, being into, like Without Grace was so much easier because, well, it took place in Cherubusco,
But
New
it was a
York.
great story, and I might invite people to go and find a copy of that
Yeah,
book.
they may find some at Cornerstone Bookstore, because he ordered them too, so that would be,
Oh, did he really?
yes, he did, yeah.
That's good. I bet he doesn't have a copy of the Author's Guide to Planning
No.
book.
That's okay.
We could put a few in the lobby here and comfort in while you're here. We're doing this on November 7th, 2013.
Do you believe
And
that?
even though this program is generally not aired locally on the cable systems or on the internet until sometime after
Sure,
that,
sure.
most of these events will be history. You will have you received millions of dollars and for selling your book. You will be far beyond even communicating with the likes of Calvin and me.
Oh, no, that'll never happen.
But
We'll
do
always
you
communicate.
think about the ultimate future of this book in any way beyond we hope it?
There are, in reality, there is one scene in the book that I see would make a really awesome video trailer, movie trailer.
Oh, I saw that on every page.
Oh, really? I have the soundtrack. I know what I would love to see. So that, as far as that, but normally, like Connie and I were talking about this in the car ride, I tend to live in the present. I tend to, I appreciate what is right now, although, as you all know, you have to market for the future. But what's happening this weekend up here, what's happening here, this is awesome. This is, I feel like a celebrity. And that's, you don't get.
Well, you are a
I want my
celebrity.
kids to see this, because they do not realize.
You know what? I've known people, and maybe you have as well, who are not proud of their heritage here in the North Country. And they leave and go to, big cities somewhere, and they forget. But I can name for you many friends of mine who have become rich and famous and who are very happy to promote their roots here in the North Country.
Yeah,
So if the day ever came when you weren't proud to be from Cherubusco,
you'd never talk to me again.
I would never talk to you again until
Does she?
you invited me for lunch. But it's true. I can name opera singers, playwrights, quite a few actors and actresses, and so can Calvin, who spent much of their childhood or parts of their adult life here in Plattsburgh and the North Country, who are proud of it.
Right.
I'm thinking instantly of a name you're not familiar with, Dawn Fratangelo, who came here, went to
It does sound familiar to me.
Plattsburgh State, began her television career at WPTZ Channel 5 in Plattsburgh, went on to much bigger and better things, and who came back here year after year to visit her friends at SUNY Plattsburgh and Plattsburgh, a humble and beautiful woman who never forgot that this area embraced her,
Right.
whether or not she needed it as a young person, a neophyte in the business. And there are so many more that I think of.
Right. No, I think that's
You know,
awesome.
we tend to focus on negative things, everybody but you and me and Connie
Calvin.
and Calvin. But we tend to open the television, turn the television on, or open the newspaper and see, well, this mass murderer
Oh.
went to Plattsburgh Senior High School in and so that's what we think of. I like to say, this famous author.
Yay.
So the fact that you're embraced by your friends in Chateauguay
Oh,
and you're
yes.
up and lights on the marquee is a good thing. So
Yeah.
this book launch will continue for some time.
Next
You're already
weekend.
into January.
Well,
So,
yeah,
but-
that'll be just an actual book event. The launch ends like November 16th on Long Island. I don't want Copa Divino to freak out and think I'm going to ask them for more.
Just bring the wine. I'll go to all of them.
I do hope you're going to show up tonight. Yeah, no, and then I'll be doing in January. And from November 17th on, this is what I learned from working at Borders, is that you don't really book events, that people are too busy with the holiday season. And so, but January 14th is when I'm going to start picking it up again.
And the next question is,
Uh-oh,
since you say you write every day,
yeah.
what can we expect in the future?
Well, I do have a third novel that I've been working on for like 3 or 4 years.
Aren't you glad I asked? What is it? Can you
It's-
say?
You know, I can. The working title, and I've noticed the theme with all my titles, and this one has no spiritual context whatsoever. It's called The Lambs Roar. And the Lambs that's their last name, the family, the Lambs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
that isn't the image I can't conjure it up at the moment.
And
The
they.
lambs
yeah,
roar?
roar. And
Roar, the lambs roar.
And it's a dysfunctional family, aren't we all?
Of course,
And, yeah, and,
what would your life be without talking about dysfunctional families?
And it's five adult
gosh.
siblings all converging for some, I haven't decided. I think they're going to be either for their father's retirement, but they all have a reason to get together. And it takes place in one day. The novel takes place in one day. So each one's trying to get there, but yet they all have these hiccups in getting there because they really don't want to get together. So that I've been working on for 3 or 4 years, and I'm working on something else that I have to be quiet about because I'm working on with a friend,
Yeah.
and so she wants me to just not talk about
Oh, you
it.
have the neatest friends, not to mention your family members.
I know. I was so excited for today. Huh?
Children's
Do a
book?
children's book?
Have
Oh,
you thought about that?
I have thought about that. There have been times that it's crossed my.
Well, you know, as I said at the outset here, just because we're sitting at the same table doesn't mean that I would in any way fit into a category close to yours in
You got to
terms of the
stop
things
that
we
because
do.
no.
I love to share my life. Calvin does the same behind that camera. We all do in one way or
Oh,
the other.
sure.
But I felt driven to write children's books right
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning because people like my mother, good, bad, or indifferent, read to me all the time.
Right.
And if she didn't read to me from the Reader's Digest of the Bible or Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy
Right.
or all those stories we remember, she would make them up. And my mother was the best storyteller of all. And we've just finished the Halloween period in the North Country, and I've told ghost stories to many people, but I'm also in the process of editing that last children's book
Right.
that I hope will be out by the end of the year. And
And what's the name of the children's book?
Sparkles and Shiner.
Sparkles and Shiner.
Who knows
I
what
love that title.
what it might turn out to be. It's something that I wrote many years ago, like your Of Little Faith book.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left the radio business in 1997, I didn't know what I was going to have for lunch, nor could I afford to buy lunch if I wanted to. With no retirement and no benefits of any
Oh.
kind, I walked out the door of that radio station, and then, as I said to you many times, turn the page.
Right.
The next chapter will be different from the last chapter. And it has been.
Sure.
So I started doing many things since then, and I spent the whole summer of 1997 joining Calvin on this program called Our Little Corner and writing. So I wrote a stack of children's books.
I love it.
And I revisit them once in a while, and Sparkles and Shiner is one of them. And we all have our favorite things that we write. We don't always tell people they're our favorites because that sounds a little bit too vain. But I wrote a book called Marilyn in the Magic Closet that I would love to see in print sometime. How many of us always wished we could open the door of a time machine, close
Oh.
it, and go anywhere in the past or the future? I've asked kids this, I've asked old grandmothers and great-grandmothers this, and everybody's got a different time they'd like to go
Oh,
to.
really?
Where would yours be?
That's so funny. Just the other night, I asked my son-in-law and my two daughters a very similar question. I said, if you could be born in any particular time in history, except the time that you were actually born, when would it be? And they all basically said the 1940s. And then I started to say, yeah, me too. Then I realized, oh, wait, that was very close to when I was.
Oh, no.
I did. I really did. And then I was
don't
like,
want to relive that
yeah,
time
I
in
was
my
like, wait.
life.
They all looked at me like I had two heads. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm older than I realized. I guess being a woman, it's different than a man. So with women's rights and everything, I think start mark your question. That's a good question. I would say as 1920, 30, 31. No, I don't know. You know why? Because I'm thinking of all the horrors that happened.
There are horrors that happened at every age.
Okay,
And
the
I would-
1932.
I would go back to the Middle Ages.
Would you really?
Oh, my gosh, yes. Marilyn in the Magic Closet, and I won't give away the whole story, but it's about a little girl from Saranac and Redford who walked into a closet of an old house that was being converted, closed the door, and when she opened the door of the closet, she was in England in the 1540s,
Oh,
in the
England.
middle of a forest, and her whole family and even her dog with 12 puppies were transported back in time.
Oh, wow. Oh, her whole family.
But the point is, in our reverie, at least in my twisted mind, you can think about things like that.
Right.
You can go back in time in your mind.
Right.
Most of my friends and relatives know that I've worked with hypnosis for many years and helping people to go back and recover various good and
I
bad
didn't know
times
you
in their
did that.
lives
Okay.
and relive their own birth
Mm-hmm.
and then go into past lives if you believe that's
Mm-hmm.
possible. So some of these people have told me stories that I can confirm and some that I can't. But
Right.
that period of the 1500s, to
Wow.
me, when there were awakenings beyond what we can only imagine today in science and
Sure.
so on, would
Sure.
be, how did we, you might think of this in retrospect as
Yeah,
the
right.
most horrible
The
time of your
word
life.
for the
What the
day
heck was
is
he talking about?
retrospect.
So anyway, we can expect good things from you.
Okay,
In
good.
2014 and the
I'm
rest of
hoping so.
2013.
Hoping so.
We stay in touch on a regular basis,
Yes, we
whether
do.
we need it or not.
Oh, I always need my Gordy
But
fix.
for me, there is always a need to know.
Yeah.
And as I said right at the beginning, there are people who will read this book. There are people who won't read it just because of what we said here today. But if they do, I promise they will have an opinion
Mm-hmm.
on this or other subjects. And this will hopefully have people comment, talk to their favorite clergyman, their favorite librarian, and maybe even get their kids around a table. And that's the wonderful thing about growing up when I did. My mother had a closed mind. My father did not. He was a poor country preacher. And whenever I would come up with these cockamamie ideas of mine
Love
about walking outside the box, my father would say, let me think about that. He wouldn't say, are you nuts? Are you totally crazy? He would say, let me think about that.
Right.
And he would come back after thinking about it legitimately and giving his opinion and telling me, live your life. And I don't mind telling my friends here now because thanks to Calvin, I have no secrets in my life at all. That's what Kay says. You tell everybody everything. But, you know, I attended some colleges and they weren't always pleasant experiences when they wrote me the letter saying, don't come back to this school,
that's
don't come back to this town. We prefer if you'd stay out of New York State
I
entirely.
think my next book's going to be a biography on Gordy Little.
Oh, dear God. The first 100 pages will go up in flames the minute it shows up on the shelf. But sadly, I've been at places where my father would come to visit me wherever I was, and we'd sit in the car, and my father would just say, why? And he'd cry, where did I go wrong? But, we embraced each other at the end, and that's what counts. And I know what your relationship was with your parents and with your sister.
Sure.
And now, other siblings, you have a brother.
Two brothers,
Two brothers.
Calvin.
Yeah.
He's not that Calvin, but Calvin and Carl. Carl's actually coming up from Maryland to be with us for today, which is kind of
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And if you believe that something happens after you die, then you know that Catherine and Chester.
Well, we're gonna.
Well.
It's nice to be together on my mom's birthday. It's
I
really,
think that is so neat. It
Yeah.
just says
Yeah.
it's
Unity.
all congealed here
Yep.
today.
They-
What else is there something you came here with the hopes that you could tell our viewers that I didn't probe into the netherworld?
Nothing that I can think of. There is a poem in the book, or a children's story, that of Little Faith, if you recall.
Oh,
where-
yes, I recall every
and-
word in that
yeah,
book.
And I just was remembering that, and that went through a lot of, and I'm still not 100% happy with that one. I'm still not quite there with it. But
it is what it is.
It is what it
That's one
is,
of my
yeah.
favorite phrases. It is, I am who I am.
Right,
I'm
right.
happy in the skin I'm in.
Yep, yep. And not a lot of people can say that they're comfortable in their own skin.
No.
Which is,
Yeah, I refuse to do too many what ifs.
Right.
You know?
yeah.
This is it, baby.
Yep.
You get it or you don't get it. Now let's
True.
talk about reviews. We haven't done that
Mm-hmm.
before. If anybody's ever read a book, you see what does it say? Serious and heartfelt, comma,
Right.
and highly readable. Meredith Sue Willis.
Yeah.
Then you look on the back and you see a few more sometimes and a few inside. So you have to solicit. You have
Right.
to call in the chits from your good friends. But it's very nice when somebody reviews it for a major publication,
Right,
the
right.
New York Times or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know that the New York Times will review this, but I did get a beautiful review a couple of days ago by a magazine called Forward Magazine. It's a
You
publishing.
told me on Facebook
Oh my goodness. the
you couldn't give them a $10,000 bill and get a better review
No,
than that.
it was
girl.
just, it really, they got it. They got what I was doing with the book. They got what I was trying to say. And usually, you wait for that critical moment where they have something to critique negatively, and they didn't. And I was stunned. I was like, really? Because I would have critiqued a couple things.
Book reviews are different than movie reviews.
Mm.
I'm not a huge movie fan. Calvin is, but only a certain genre of movies. He has collected thousands and thousands
I
of
need
Western
to know
and
what-
cowboy
Oh,
movies
Western and cowboys, okay.
from way back when.
Mhm.
I like movies,
Mhm.
but when I was a little kid, it was forbidden
Right.
in my family to go to a regular movie.
Oh, sure. My mom's side of the
Forbidden.
family. Yeah, my side of the family.
So
a
we
lot of them, same
didn't,
thing.
we didn't go. We could watch a newsreel.
Right,
So anyway, we don't go to many movies.
right.
We just came back in real time since we're doing this in early November from Georgia. And we were at a place called Conyers, Georgia, and they had just finished filming a movie there and released a movie called Prisoners about two kids that were kidnapped.
Oh.
And this father goes out and tries to find the person who
Oh,
kidnapped the daughters.
the
And-
Hugh
and it's,
Jackman. Yeah.
sadly, from my point of view, it was far too violent.
I heard.
Graphic scenes, and my poor wife and I wanted to walk out of the theater, but since it had been filmed around Conyers, I thought I better watch it. Great story, but left me with great anguish when I walked away. But
Yeah.
by the same token, it was something that we did talk about and discuss. And if nothing else, we hope that this is a platform.
Right, right, yeah. No, it's true. Discuss it, sure.
Will you have the opportunity of sitting down in groups and and talking about
I
them?
want to make it a book discussion book, so that I am going to reach out to book clubs and see if they'll, and I think they will. They've got to discover it first, yeah.
Well, with your permission,
Yes,
I will present this book from my own point of view to what I think is a rather prestigious book club in Cincinnati, Ohio.
oh, really?
That happens to be attended by my youngest son, Kirk Little, who's is a doctor of psychology.
Oh, wow.
And from his point, my views of the whole world are jaundiced based on my own experience. His is more clinical and,
Right, sure.
and so on. But I would love to ask them to read this book and discuss it. These are all
You're not going
professional.
to hear no from me. That would be
but
awesome.
these are professional people
Right.
who, they talk about scientific journals and so on. But I would like to have them take this book
That would be
and
great.
just get an opinion. So
Well, that's
if you see smoke coming out of my computer,
And coming into mine? That would be great. Well, the interesting thing, what you mentioned, was that the publisher, in her previous job, she was, I don't know if she still does it, but she's a therapist counselor.
there.
And I think that's why she was so driven to this. It's so funny you mentioned that. See how that works?
Perspective. Perspective is very
Perspective and
important, and
perspective.
everybody will read this book and every other book from the perspective of their own lives.
Absolutely.
You can't help but
No.
identify with certain things, and because I've commented on, almost ad nauseum.
No, I love your comments.
On this book with you, because we all reflect on our own lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of us are closed-minded, some are open-minded, some couldn't care less whatever comes out of the
Right.
sky and lands on their table, they'll read.
If it's
And
food, that's
I've
always
read
good.
hundreds of, but I've read so many books that I didn't want to read.
What do you mean?
know.
Like you were told you had to read? And
Well, in school.
Oh, right.
Go through school and through college. I majored, in humanities, and I'm Garrison Keeler's English major,
Right. Yeah.
So I had to read a lot of things I didn't want to.
Right, right.
And then when I look back on it now and say, wow, I'm glad. When you're not old enough to remember, but when the Brothers Karamazov was first published,
Right.
I spent a whole semester on that book.
Really.
And I would go home at night saying, dear God, how did I ever become an English major, a humanities major? This is terrible. And yet now, when there was a movie produced, Brothers Karamazov, and now all these years later, with hindsight,
Sure.
there's that word again,
Right.
I say, boy, am I glad that I got a chance to study that from a different point of view.
Well, I think that's what happens a lot, because I find that I will read a book and a few years later, numerous years later, I'll reread the book and I'm like, I didn't remember that. Wow, that really, you have matured, you have changed, and the book brings something
Gulliver's
different.
Travels.
Oh, my goodness.
Through the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Stories that we read as little children, and I was fortunate enough to be able to read all those classics when I was like 6 or 7
Wow.
years old.
That's amazing.
Just because the written word was everywhere.
Yeah.
And now, as an adult, to realize, whoa, that's satire.
Yeah.
This
This
guy was making a
Barry
real
had a
statement.
very interesting
So,
life. Yeah.
that includes everything right down to Grimm's fairy tales
Right,
and
right.
Mother Goose and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yep.
Carol, guess what?
We're done.
This has been a huge thrill for me.
Oh, me too.
And, it's something we look forward to because we love to talk to people and we love to share stories on Hometown Cable and elsewhere. I will look forward tremendously to the progress
Thank
of
you.
not only this book, but the life of Carol Hoenig.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint.
Well, because, I still think it should be Carol Sears dash Hoenig. Don't you, Connie? Huh? No.
Not Smith.
Not Smith, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Lest we forget.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for
Thank
being here. You
you.
are a sweet lady and a wonderful woman, and you have, and your young lifetime. In the few years you've been on this hunk of mud, you've made a big impact and will continue to do so for a long time to come.
Well, you're a wonderful interviewer, I tell you that, and I don't say that lightly. Trust me, I think you do a great job.
I
so
just
thank you.
think outside.
Awesome. That works beautifully.
Before we finish every program, I thank our viewers for their comments and suggestions. Lots of people tell us where to go and what to do, and we followed up on many of those. I was just looking at some of my notes, my copious notes that I have all over my house about things, suggestions for Calvin and I to go and interview people in the future, and there are many. So many interesting people and places here in the great North Country. You're one of those interesting people. You too, Connie.
I was going to say, so is Connie. Connie Ryan.
But we're so delighted you came here to be with us today. Thank you for your comments and suggestions. Thank you also for making a monetary contribution to Hometown Cable. This has, these many years, has been a labor of love for Calvin and me. This is what he does for a living. And the only way we can continue is if somebody watching from a business or an individual that has the wherewithal to write out a generous check, send it to our little corner, Hometown Cable, 1477 Ridge Road in Champlain. What's the zip? I forget.
12919.
12919. Do that today. Maybe if you'd like to include a little note saying, we like what you do, we'd like to see more of this in the future, that would be lovely. And I end every show by saying, who knows? Oh, thank you, not just to the Lord above, because Calvin went like this, but to our friends at Comfort Inn and Suites for supplying this room and inviting us with open arms. Even the desk people knew we were coming. I felt so
I know.
good when I walked in the door. And I said, where's Carol? Oh, she's gone up to check the room. This event tonight will be a big hit.
Are you joining us?
Yes, of course. Are you silly?
I hope Calvin's joining us. Bring Judy.
But anyway, thank you so much for
My
being
pleasure.
here, and you
Spell
too.
steel cut too.
And steel cut.
Spell it, spell it.
Oh,
Oh.
STEELCUT Press.
Steel cut
Press.
press.
.com.
.com. Yes, thank you.
All right. And who knows where we're going to be next time.